I'm not a good person. There's just no softer way to put it. At this stage in my life, I've made peace with that. I was dealt a difficult hand from the start, and unfortunately, I played it the only way I knew how. I'm not after anyone's pity either. It is what it is. So, with that out of the way, I hope you'll understand why I'm choosing to share this story anonymously. It's hard to believe now, but what I'm about to tell you happened nearly 20 years ago. Back in the early 2000s, I was at my absolute lowest. I was constantly in trouble, robbery, fighting, grand theft auto, you name it. The list went on and on. There was one particular horrible night when I came terrifyingly close to getting exactly what I deserved. Around that time, there was a stretch of about 6 months where I played this twisted little game. Every few days, I'd drive out to some random small town in the middle of nowhere. Since I never stayed in one place for long, finding these towns was easy. There are literally countless small towns scattered across the United States. When I rolled into one of these towns, I'd spend a bit of time scoping out the area and looking for an elderly couple. My ideal targets were always old and frail-looking. It's hard to explain, but they also had to seem weak in spirit. I know that sounds vague, but part of my con depended on them being mentally fragile as well as physically frail. Once I'd found my mark, I'd wait until it was good and dark, but not too late. Usually around 9 p.m. was my go time. That's when I'd show up frantically at their doorstep, begging for help. I'd point to my car parked on the road and claim it had broken down. I'd come up with some flimsy excuse, like my wife was in the hospital about to give birth and I desperately needed a phone to call for help. Once the old folks invited me inside, I'd tie them up and rob the blind. I never took anything sentimental, and I always did my absolute best not to hurt them. Harming them was never part of the game. I just wanted to steal their valuables. Now that you know what a piece of trash I was back then, let me tell you about the night this little game nearly cost me my life. It started just like all the others. I found my targets and got ready for the robbery. I pulled my car up in front of the house a little after 9 p.m. I planned on giving the old couple my usual spiel that my wife was pregnant and my car had died. Sadly, that line worked every single time. The location matters here, so I'll do my best to describe it. The house was practically the only one on that road. I think the next closest was about a 3-minute drive away. The front of the house sat right on the road, with barely any driveway to speak of. They had one old pickup truck, but that was parked on the side of the house in the grass. Behind the house stretched nothing but woods as far as you could see. Knowing the area was a key part of my grift because if things went south, I needed to know my best escape route. Since this house had almost no front yard or driveway, I thought my getaway would be easy. At least that's what I assumed. I put on my game face and ran to the door, knocking and screaming for help. An old woman answered. She didn't look scared or concerned in the slightest. With almost no sense of urgency, she asked what the problem was. I launched into my frantic explanation. My wife was in the hospital about to give birth, my car had broken down, and I needed to call someone for help. The woman smiled. It was a rough smile. There weren't many teeth. She grabbed my shoulder and told me to come in. Her demeanor was giving me pause. Usually, the people I was robbing at this point would be freaking out and trying to help however they could, but not this woman. She cheerfully guided me inside and told me to stand in the living room, which was the room just to the right of the front door. In a creepy voice, she told me not to worry and that I'd be okay. That's when this giant man walked into the room. Okay, maybe giant is a slight exaggeration, but he was huge, easily over 6 feet tall and probably 400 pounds. He had a bushy black beard that stuck out about 3 inches from his face. But the two most notable things about this large man were the hunting rifle in his hand and the fact that he was not old. He couldn't have been more than 25 or maybe 30. Younger people weren't as easily fooled by my game, so this was a major oversight on my part. The woman spoke up and told me this was her son and that he'd go out and take a look at my car. Before I could even get a word out, she shouted Hank at the top of her lungs. She started telling me that her husband Hank was in the other room and he'd definitely help me. She kept yelling for Hank while her son went outside. I started to panic because her son would clearly see that my car was fine, and I didn't think rushing out was the best idea since he was walking around with that rifle in his hands. Hank limped into the living room where I was standing and just stared at me. The old woman said something about helping me, and Hank just mumbled something under his breath. That's when I noticed the smell. Everything had happened so fast once I got to the door that I hadn't realized how bad the inside of the house smelled, like really, really bad. It wasn't body odor, it was something else, something worse. And that's when I decided it was time to leave. I started creeping toward the door, and I saw Hank mirroring my movements. The old woman was also getting closer to me, asking where I was going, what was wrong, and if I still wanted their help. I made up a stupid lie. I told them I needed to get something out of my car. Both of them were closing in on me. When I was about 6 feet from the front door, I made a hard move and sprinted the rest of the way. As I ran, I felt Hank try to grab me, but thankfully, my youth allowed me to slip away quickly. For a split second, I forgot about their son outside. That intense moment inside had my blood pumping, and getting out was the only thing on my mind. When I got to my car, I noticed that all 4 tires had been completely deflated. As I ran closer and inspected them, I could easily see they'd been slashed. I didn't know what to do or what was going on. I didn't see their son, but I heard Hank yell from the house that I was outside and couldn't have gotten far. I decided to run into the woods. I know it's cliché, but hiding in the cover of darkness in the woods seemed like a better idea than running down an open road. I sprinted deep into the woods for a minute or two and then hid behind a big tree to catch my breath. I got down to the ground and did my best to listen for footsteps. Not long after, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps coming toward me. I couldn't move because that would clearly draw attention to my hiding spot. I held my breath and tried not to move a single muscle. The footsteps got louder and felt like they were right on top of me. I looked to my side, and 2 feet from my head was the old couple's son walking past me, swinging the hunting rifle in his hand. I think the only reason he didn't hear me was because of the loud sound of his own heavy footsteps. I could feel myself shaking as he stepped by me. Somehow, he didn't see me and just kept walking into the dark. I waited for him to get out of sight, and then I basically crawled out of the woods. When I got back to the house, I snuck quietly back to my car. Through the windows, I could see the old woman just standing there, staring out toward the woods. Somehow, she didn't see me. I didn't see Hank, which led me to believe he must have been out in the woods too. I decided to do the stupidest thing ever, and I still can't believe it worked. I got into my car with its flat tires and essentially rolled down the street as far as I could before the tires were completely shot. Once I could hear them grinding on the pavement, I got out and ran as fast as I could back toward the town. It took me a while, but I made it. Eventually, I got someone to tow the car out of there, and I didn't tell them or the police anything about the old people. I didn't want anyone digging too deep into my life. Once I got away and had the car towed, I didn't want to think about those people ever again. I don't really know for sure what happened that night. I know what I felt, and I know what I saw. The body language, the smell, the slashed tires, everything adds up to something bad. I took this experience as a middle finger of karma from the universe. I did clean up my act somewhat soon after this, but I definitely didn't become a saint. I'm still a bad person for my past. I'm just not as bad as I used to be. And I do feel regret and remorse for a lot of what I've done. Honestly, though, I think whatever those people were up to was far worse than whatever I was doing out there. I've never shared this story in its entirety before because I don't like how it makes me look. Basically, I spent a little over a year being a criminal. I worked as an overnight security guard for a large strip mall in my hometown. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to mention the name of my hometown, the mall, or anything else that could potentially get me in trouble. For the first few months, I took my job very seriously. Once I had the lay of the land, I realized how insanely boring my job was. At first, it felt like a dream job. I'm a night owl, so staying up all night wasn't new to me. I also don't love people, and this job had about zero human interaction. I'd monitor the security cameras, make a few nightly walks around the mall, and basically listen to podcasts or watch shows on my phone all night. This honestly got old a lot quicker than I expected. It was the boredom that got to me. I needed something to add a little spice to my life. I'd spent most of my life up to that point never getting into trouble. I wasn't a bad kid, and for all my adult life, I never even got in a traffic ticket. One night, after monitoring the cameras, I realized that one of the back doors didn't have a camera near it. I don't know how that could ever happen, but I was happy it did. I should explain the layout of the strip mall. Just like any other strip mall, the stores are all lined up in the front. What was cool about this mall was that behind every store was a large back room that connected every store to the security office. From the office, I had access to every store. So even though the front door of a store would be locked, I could still get in from the back room. After discovering that back door with no camera, it got me thinking. I wondered where all the other blind spots were. I started paying closer attention to the cameras and making notes of every blind spot I could find. When I made my nightly walks, I'd go to some of these spots and do something stupid, like a dance move. Then when I got back to the office, I'd play the tape back to see if I could spot myself dancing. If I couldn't, I knew the spot was blind, and I'd note the exact location in my phone. Once I'd mapped out every blind spot, the boredom set in again. I started thinking of ways to use these spots along with the back door. I started with something small. I went to one of the stores and took a hat off a rack in a blind spot. I opened the back door and put the hat in a box outside. When I left that morning, I drove around back and grabbed the box. The next night, when I showed up, I played back the footage from when I took the hat, and there was no video of me at all. I convinced myself that I'd perfected the art of stealing just like that, and that's exactly what I did for a long time. At some point during every shift, I'd steal something just because I could. Sometimes it'd be something small like a cheap t-shirt, and other times it'd be something far more valuable like an expensive pair of sneakers. I knew these stores had inventory counts, so I was careful and methodical about what I took. I apologize for the long setup, but I think it's necessary to understand my job and what I was doing for full context. One night, while making my rounds, I heard something the first time anything of note had ever happened. The only crime that ever occurred on my watch was the one I was committing myself. The noise sounded like children laughing. I pulled out my flashlight and searched the area, but I didn't see anyone. I could hear the laughter all around me, along with what sounded like whispers, though the whispers were incoherent. I started yelling for them to come out, but nothing. I could hear movement and laughing, but I couldn't see anything. The worst part was that it was all around me, and I still couldn't see a thing. I felt like I was going crazy. I shouted that I was going to call the police, like the tough security guard I was, and the laughing stopped for a second, only to start right back up again. I ran out of the store and back to the office. I pulled up the tape and saw nothing. All you could see on the security footage was me waving the flashlight around like an idiot and yelling at nothing. I didn't call the police because my plan was to catch these kids when they tried to escape. I may know where all the blind spots are, but I knew there was no way these kids would know them too. I pulled up all the camera feeds for that store and watched them all night. Surprisingly, I saw nothing for the entire evening. Close to dawn, I went back to the store and walked around, but I saw no evidence of kids or break-ins. I chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me and decided to move past it. I had next 2 nights off. When I came back, I asked the guy who was leaving as I was punching in if anything weird had happened, and he said no. That night, I decided to check out that store again and maybe help myself to a little something. When I got there around 3 o'clock in the morning, I made my way to the sneaker section. As I grabbed a pair of new Vans, I heard something swoosh by me. I froze because any unexpected noise is alarming in that situation. I shouted, "Who's there?" But the only response I got was that taunting laughter again. I ran out of the aisle, still holding the Vans. Once again, I was shining the flashlight all over the store, and again, I saw nothing. I was shouting and moving around erratically, one hand holding the sneakers and the other holding the flashlight as I aggressively walked through the store. I made my way to one of the corners, and then I saw something move from the corner of my eye. I looked down the aisle to my left and shouted. I saw a small figure come out from the back of the aisle and wave at me. I tried shining my flashlight, but they were too far away. It just looked like a dark shadow. I told them to stay there and started running toward them. I took my eyes off the shadow for 1 second, and they were gone. I started running around that area like a crazy person, shouting, but I couldn't see them again. I could still hear the laughter and running all around me. Then I heard one of the voices, clear as day, say my full name. That was enough for me. I wanted no part of being in that store anymore. I ran back to the security office. I didn't even realize through all the confusion that I still had the vans in my hand. I set them down in the office and told myself I'd bring them back in the morning. Right now, I just wanted to pull up the footage and catch whoever these kids were messing with me. I watched every second of the feed, and not once could you see anything other than me running around. I looked completely insane. The craziest part is that there's a camera facing down the aisle where I saw the kid, but on the footage, you can't see anyone. I don't know if it was too dark or what, but there was no sign of anyone. That morning when my supervisor showed up, I told her all about the previous night and the night from 2 days ago. She pulled up the footage and only saw me running around like an idiot. She also saw the vans in the office and questioned why I had them. I didn't have a real answer for her. I could tell she was more suspicious of me. She told me that some stores had reported theft and that the vans in my office and my erratic behavior didn't look good. I kept trying to tell her I wasn't being erratic and that there was someone in the store. I told her they even knew my name, but she didn't believe me. She basically accused me of stealing right there, and I denied it. I quit on the spot because I felt like if I didn't work there anymore, I couldn't get in trouble for stealing. I don't know why I thought that. They ended up doing an investigation for the theft, not the potential intruders I reported. Somehow, I didn't get caught, and nobody was arrested. When I think about this experience, I wonder if maybe I'm crazy and was seeing things that weren't there. I don't have any history of seeing or hearing things like this, and I haven't experienced anything like it since. I know what I saw. I know I can't prove it, and I know it sounds insane, but I know I saw someone standing there. I know someone was messing with me. I just can't believe they knew my name. Dear Mr. Nightmare, I've been watching your videos for many years. Some of the stories you've narrated have reminded me of myself and things I've done in the past. I'm not proud of it, but I think it'd be interesting for your viewers to hear a story from the so-called bad guy's perspective. For that reason, I'll obviously stay anonymous. So, I wouldn't say I was a bad person before this. I mostly kept to myself, went to class, did what I had to do, and went home. I've always been socially awkward, and I didn't really have friends, but it never bothered me that much because that was normal for me during my school days. Then one day, I got paired with a girl for a presentation in one of my classes. I'll call her Emily. She was normal and easy to talk to, the kind of person who made group work enjoyable. The first time we met up in the library, we went over the outline for about an hour, but I found myself paying attention to things that had nothing to do with the project. Small things about her and the way she talked and wrote. I realized instantly that I had a thing for her. After that, we exchanged numbers to stay in touch about the presentation, and that should have been the end of it. That night, I looked her up online. It wasn't hard to find her after saving her number. I could see her Snapchat profile through contacts, which is how I got her name. Within a few minutes, I had her Instagram, and from there, it just kept going. I thought it was harmless. I was just curious because, honestly, this was the only real female interaction I'd had in a long time, and I was infatuated. I scrolled through her photos. I saw where she went, who she spent time with, and I started noticing details in the background that I could piece together. It turned into me checking her accounts constantly. It had become part of my routine. Within a few days, I had a pretty good idea of what neighborhood she lived in. I took things too far when I looked up how to find someone's address with their phone number and realized how easy it was. When I found it, I drove past her house once, then circled back and slowed down. There was a light on upstairs, and I wondered if it was her bedroom. I noticed the red car parked in front of the house that I was pretty sure was hers because it had a parking sticker for our college on the side window. I should have stopped there, but I got addicted to stalking this girl. It turned into something I did a couple nights a week. I always stayed in my car and told myself I wasn't crossing a line, even though I clearly already had. One night, I was parked a little further down the street and noticed the blinds in the upstairs window shift a little bit. I saw someone peering out. I couldn't tell if it was her, but it was definitely someone looking out. I started freaking out thinking she or a family member had noticed me and was onto me. I left right away, probably making it more suspicious. The whole drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day in class, Emily acted completely normal. But at one point, she made a comment that made my heart drop. She made a subtle remark about some of the boys at school being creepy and that she was dealing with a stalker situation. I didn't ask her to go deeper into it because I was terrified to know if she was referring to me. After that, I stopped going near her house. I stopped checking her profile as much too. I was convinced she might have caught on, and I didn't want to push it further. Now, here's where things really started messing with my head. At that time, I was living in my grandparents' house that was handed down to my parents after they both passed, and I still do live here. So I was alone. I was in my room at like 9 o'clock at night, and I heard something outside, a light tap against the window. I don't mean someone ominously tapping their finger on the glass. I mean, it sounded like someone brushing up against the glass, as if trying to look inside. I was too scared to go look, though. The next night, it happened again. But this time, it sounded like it was coming from a different side of the house. That's when I knew it wasn't a coincidence. And it only got worse. I started seeing shapes through the blinds, someone standing too close to the window. It was never clear enough to see who, just enough to know there was a person or multiple people circling my house. I stopped opening the blinds completely after that. I stayed in my room with the door locked and the lights off. This went on for days. I stopped going to class entirely. I barely left my room unless I had to. There was a person or group of people trying to see if I was home. I started using my limited money to have food and necessities delivered because I didn't want to leave the house. Every sound made me feel like someone was right outside. During all of this, Emily started texting me, asking if I was okay since I hadn't shown up to class or responded about the project. I didn't answer right away, but eventually I replied and told her I was sorry and asked her to please stop sending people to my house. As soon as I sent it, I regretted it. Her response came a few minutes later. The typing bubble came up, then disappeared, then came up, then disappeared. I watched the whole time as she was definitely trying to figure out how to respond. When she did, she responded confused and concerned, asking what I was talking about. That was the moment it really hit me that maybe she had nothing to do with any of this. I tried to play it off like I'd sent the message to the wrong person, and she surprisingly didn't question it after that. But the damage was already done in my head. That night was the worst it had been. It was late, and I was sitting on my bed in the dark when the doorbell rang. It came out of nowhere and made my heart jump. I lay still for a few seconds before getting up and walking downstairs with all the lights still off. Yes, I was living in darkness for days. I stood near the door without opening it, just to listen. The person on the other side must have heard me because they asked me to open the door. Not asked, they told me to. I told them I didn't order anything. The tone on the other side got more aggressive, telling me to open the door like it wasn't a request anymore. I didn't respond. I just backed away and went upstairs as quietly as I could. Then I locked myself in my room. They spammed the doorbell for a solid minute. I was hiding in my bed like a coward. After a minute or two, they stopped. I went to stay with my parents for a few days, not telling them the reason because I didn't want to explain my creepy actions. The rest of my time working with Emily in class was very awkward. I never found out if she sent her family or friends or whoever my house. If it wasn't her, I don't know who it could have been. Regardless, I never went to her house again or stalked her page again. Whoever was coming to my house lost interest after I spent about 5 days at my parents' place. I got a taste of my own medicine, and I never want that to happen again. 2 years ago, I was what you'd call lost in life. I had no direction. I worked dead-end jobs, had no relationships, and just blindly went through life. Something was missing. I tried filling the void with a lot of different fixes, but I was always left feeling empty. Until one day, I did something strange, something that gave me such a rush. I trespassed into a home in my neighborhood. Don't worry, I know how sketchy this is. Basically, I knew the owners of the house, and I knew they were at work that day. Earlier that morning, they'd had some workers go to their house to do some kind of construction project. I just happened to see them leave for lunch when I was on a walk. I don't know what came over me, but I went to the front door, checked if it was locked, and it wasn't. I walked inside and just took a self-tour of their home. The rush of being inside someone else's house was exhilarating. I stayed for several minutes and left before the construction crew came back. After that day, I started breaking into homes I knew were empty just for the thrill of it. I never took anything. I just walk around and observe people's living spaces. I get this eerie rush standing in a room, just the feeling of knowing I was there and the person had no idea. It was an amazing feeling for me. But just like every other fix in my life, this started to get old as well. That eerie rush eventually disappeared. Knowing I was in the house soon became not enough. I needed more. I started calling myself a reverse thief. I'd go into these homes and leave something behind, something inconspicuous. Even though I'd never see the reaction with my own eyes, I'd fantasize about it. For example, one time I left a folded blanket on the living room couch, a blanket I'd brought with me, not one the owners already had. The idea of the conversations that would start made me almost giddy. I was like a small child on Christmas morning. In hindsight, I know how twisted this is. If I ever came home and saw something like that, I'd probably freak out and call the cops. This reverse thief thing became my life. I'd base my entire week around it. I started people watching intensely. Once I had an idea of their schedule, I'd locate the home and find a weak area to enter when the owners weren't home. You'd be surprised how many people have a key under a doormat or in one of those fake rock things. It was only a matter of time before I started becoming a real terror. I started getting really dark. To give you an idea of how messed up I was, I'll share this little story. One time, I left a big pink hair tie and an eyeshadow pencil in the bathroom of a house. I hid in a bush on the side of the house and waited for the couple to get home from work. I needed to hear this reaction. The woman got home first, and she was not pleased. Her husband got home shortly after, and they began to fight. He obviously had no idea what she was talking about, but the evidence was there. Can you imagine coming home and finding something like that? I'm sure it wouldn't end well for anyone. I became this mischievous little monster, and I loved it. It was only a matter of time before I got a taste of my own medicine. One afternoon, when I got home from work, I noticed something on my counter in the kitchen. It was a little vase with one small yellow flower, something that was definitely not there when I left that morning. Next to the vase was a note. It was written in cursive and said, "We know it was you." I felt sick. I checked all my locks, and everything appeared to be locked up. I couldn't think of anyone who could have done this to me. I was always so careful not to leave a trail. I went to my bedroom that night and locked the door. Calling the cops wasn't an option because if this person actually knew who I was, they could ruin me. I thought about going back to my parents' house, but that was a headache I didn't want to deal with. That night, I did some soul searching. I decided it was time to end my reverse thief charade. I woke up in the morning expecting to have another surprise. Thankfully, there was nothing. I ran some errands, and when I got back home, I wasn't so lucky. This time, I had another surprise waiting for me. Once again, on the counter was a note, this time accompanied by a dead bird. The note said, "We're coming for you." That moment, I ran to the bedroom and started packing a bag. I was going to stay at my parents' house until I could figure out a plan. When I got to the room, I heard something shuffling, not from inside the room, but from the vent. I went over and put my ear to the vent on the floor. There was movement coming from downstairs in the basement. There was no doubt in my mind that someone was down there. While listening, I could hear voices, muffled, too quiet to make out what they were saying. At least I thought they were voices. I slowly got up, trying not to make any noise, even though I'd already been home for several minutes. I grabbed my bag and slowly made my way to the door. Each step I took felt like I was making a ton of noise. Every time I thought I heard something, I'd freeze. Once I realized there was nothing, I'd continue my slow walk. I got to the front door, which was located right next to the door that led to the basement. My curiosity was killing me. I wanted to know who was messing with me and who was potentially in my house. I opened the basement door. I could hear quiet voices talking. I was sure they were voices now. As I took one step onto the creaky wooden stairs, I heard a loud shout. I shouted down the stairs, but nobody shouted back. I knew I'd heard voices literally 3 seconds ago. I was too scared to go down and look, especially if there was more than one person. I turned around and slammed the basement door. I crept out of the house quietly. I got in my car and kept looking back at the house to see if anyone followed me, but nobody ever did. I drove to my parents' house and told them I needed to stay there for a few days because the landlord at my place was fixing some plumbing issues. I stayed at my parents' house for a week. After making it that long, without any more weird gifts or notes, I thought it might be safe to go back to my house and see if anyone was still there. While I was at my parents' place, I also contacted my landlord and asked if I could get out of my lease a month early, which he agreed to. I planned on staying at my parents' house for the next month while I packed everything up, just in case these visitors came back. I got back to the house to start packing. The first thing I noticed was that the door was unlocked and wide open. I know I didn't lock it when I left, but I definitely closed it. The next thing I noticed was that they'd left several more gifts in the kitchen. Another dead bird, some more flowers, and a little toy car that looked just like mine. I went to the bedroom and listened intently to the vent. I didn't hear anything, so I went to the basement door, opened it, and started screaming down there. No noise at all. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, just in case, and went to the basement. Nobody was there. I felt a brief moment of relief. I thought to myself, maybe they figured I left for good, and because of that, they left. At least that's what I hoped. I wasn't going to take any chances, though. I grabbed a few essential things and ran to my car. I just didn't want to be in there anymore. Since I had a month to move out, grabbing everything right now was a waste of time. I reversed out of the driveway, and as I put the car in drive, I saw something. Directly across the street was an older couple standing there. Not super old, maybe in their 50s or 60s. These were two people I'd never seen before, which wouldn't be weird on its own. What made it weird was that the older woman waved to me, and I noticed a small yellow flower in her hand. It looked like the same type of flower that was left in my kitchen. The man next to her didn't do anything. He just stood there and watched me. I didn't engage with him at all. I stepped on the gas and drove away. I looked in the mirror one time as I sped down the street and could see them still looking in my direction. When I was driving back to my parents' house, I took a roundabout way. I didn't see them follow me, but I was paranoid now. I spent the next few weeks afraid of my own shadow. Every noise made me jump. Every person who got too close, I thought they were trying to grab me. I can say that this experience changed me for sure. That day I got that first flower was the end of my reverse thievery. To this day, I have never been caught. But even more disturbing to me is that I still have no idea who broke into my home and why. If it were that older couple, I can honestly say I have no idea who they were. The only thing I can say for sure is that crime doesn't pay, because eventually you always get what's coming to you, one way or another.